The cycle of empires is an interesting phenomenon and one that seems to have played itself out multiple times throughout antiquity. One striking thing about all of these empires is that they each produced their own stories about the cycle, some relatively new, others based on far older tales from their own history. So it should come as no surprise that similar stories exist across cultures and language barriers, such as Europe and Southern Asia, both having sprung from the same source, the Proto-Indo-Europeans. This would explain fair amounts of similarities between the cultures and their myths and legends, even their gods. Because, of course, before the import of Christianity into Europe, Europeans worshipped various pantheons of gods with greater or lesser degrees of synchronicity between them. And even though certain Christians worked hard to mock, demonize, and destroy these pantheons, others worked hard to peacefully convert people and even maintain their knowledge and beliefs. Written deep in church archives for safekeeping so as not to be forgotten, and even allowed various deities and religious motifs to be absorbed into Christian teachings and architecture. Many Christian saints are in fact pagan gods from previous religions. It's not hard to locate other motifs of these gods in Christian architecture, renditions of the Green Man, proposed by some to be one of the many representations of the Celtic god Cernunnos, god of the forests, nature, and the wild hunt, whose depictions not only greatly resemble the Greek god Pan, but also the Christian rendition of Satan. But this is another topic for another time. Today I wish to focus on the shared mythology of these cultures regarding the end times, the rapture, the Ragnarok, the Kali Yuga, and more. All different stories, all from different times and different places, and yet telling the same stories, giving the same warnings, reaching forward from their own past to attempt to save their children from a seemingly inevitable fate. I shall go through these stories in as close to chronological order as I can make out, and will be reading from a variety of books and different translations, so you may find the versions here to be different perhaps from ones you have read, but the overall messages should be similar and clear. Many of these stories seem to take place across 4 to 5 stages, although more commonly 4. Ovid, a Roman poet in his work Metamorphoses, describes the 4 cycles and links them to 4 metals he defines as being each more base than the last. The Iron Age being the last age before a glorious rebirth into the Age of Gold, which inevitably leads to the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and finally back to Iron. The Gold Age is an era where the gods commune freely with humans, teaching them agriculture and architecture. It is an era of high trust, moral goodness, and fruitfulness. The Second Age is the Silver Age. This is mostly a time of humans having to work to survive. The gods are still around, but not as much as in the previous era. In all ways, the Silver Age is a replication of the Gold Age. However, it is imperfect. It is an age where man must plant his own seed and harvest his own crops, for they no longer freely spring from the earth as they did in the Golden Age. Third is the Bronze Age, characterized by people whose natures are described as more violent and fierce, ready to indulge in war, but not yet fully savage. These wars are driven, it would seem, by material inequalities and hardship that began in the Age of Silver. Those who farmed and prepared for hardship envied and thus destroyed, and their resources taken by those in need. The gods begin to vanish and leave humanity behind. Iron is the final age before the rebirth, characterized by an eruption in people's most base natures. Truth, shame, and honor vanish. In their place, fraud, deceit, and trickery. Ovid writes how the land that was common to all as the light of the sun is, and the air was marked out to its fullest boundaries by weary surveyors. Not only did they demand the crops and food the rich soils owed them, but they entered the bowels of the earth and excavated the wealth it concealed. Wealth that incites men to crime. He goes on to explain that this wealth leads to war and betrayal, friend against friend, brother against brother, with husbands longing for the deaths of their wives, and wives for the deaths of their husbands. It is in this time that piety dies, and the virgin goddess Astrea, last of the immortals, abandons this world. The tale ends with Jupiter destroying humanity by flood, and this gives birth to a new golden age. The Norse tale of the Ragnarok is recorded in the Poetic Edda in the poem Völuspá. It tells the story of creation and of the end of the world, related to the audience by a female seer addressing Odin. Parts of the story of Ragnarok relate to wolves as part of the destruction of the gods and the end times. One stanza relates to the howl of the great wolf Garma from the cave of Nipaldir as the herald of the end. Now the wolf Garma howls loud before Nipaldir. The fetter will burst and the wolf run free. Much do I know, and more can I see, of the fate of the gods, the mighty in fight. Brothers will fight each other. Sisters' children will defile kinship. It is harsh in the world. Whoredom rife. An axe age. A sword age. Shields are riven. A wind age. A wolf age. Before the world goes headlong. No man will have mercy on another. At the end of the Ragnarok in chapter 53, it is stated that some gods and men yet live. The earth is described as reappearing from the sea, having slipped beneath the waves as a result of Ragnarok, beautiful and green, and filled with self-sown crops. The Celtic creation myth, specifically the prophecies of Morrigan, who together with Babd and Macha, the goddesses of death, prophecy and love, there are two texts found. One after the Irish battle with the Fomorians, a fictional race of giants who came from under the mountains, or in some readings giants who raided from the sea, which tells of the good times of peace following the war. Peace to the sky, sky to the earth, strength in everyone, a cup very full, a fullness of honey, honour enough. Summer in winter, spear supported by shield, shield supported by fort, forts fierce, eager for battle. Fleece from sheep, woods grown full with deer, forever destructions have departed. Nuts on trees, branches drooping down, drooping from growth. Wealth for a son. And so it goes on, speaking of a time of plenty, summers in winter, easy times, food in abundance, nuts on trees, reminiscent of the self-sown crops from our previous two stories. However, the prophecy of the end times was also told. I shall not see a world which will be dear to me. Summer without blossoms, cattle without milk, women without modesty, men without valour, conquests without a king, wood without mast, which here is trees without nuts that fall to provide food, sea without produce, false judgments of old men, false precedents of lawyers, every man a betrayer, every son a reaver. The son will go to the bed of his father, the father will go to the bed of his son, each his brother's brother-in-law. He will not seek any woman outside his house. An evil time. Sons will deceive fathers, daughters will deceive mothers. Again, we see similar themes. The end times are when society breaks down. People have no honour. They betray each other for no other reason than to betray. They cheat each other, and sexual immorality runs rampant. Food is in short supply. The earth does not naturally yield enough for people to survive. Even in the first prophecy of plenty, she mentions people being ready for war and conflict. This could seem to then breed the second prophecy and taken in line with the other stories we have seen, possibly because they share a point of origin. It should be noted here the Celts also have a flood myth, although it seems somewhat separate to the story of the end times. India also has a story of the end times which correlate with all of the above, almost certainly indicating a shared indo-european origin point. The Vedic Hinduism speaks of Yuga, an era with a 4-age cycle. The cycle goes Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and finally Kali Yuga. Satya Yuga, also called Krita Yuga, is the golden age, an age of truth and perfection. This Yuga has no crime and maximum kindness. There is only one religion and all people are saintly. Humans are giants, powerful, honest, youthful, vigorous, erudite, virtuous, and free of disease. There is no need for specific religious ceremonies as people live their religion in everything they do. There is no agriculture or mining. The earth provides all that is needed freely. Treta Yuga, the second age, comes. Virtues diminish. People of power begin to rise to dominate others and conquer the world. Agriculture and mining begin so that people may expand their domain. Oceans and deserts form and the weather begins to change in cycles. Dvapara Yuga is the third age. People lose more of their virtues. Tamas, the guna or quality of inertia, dullness, and lethargy begin to take hold. The Vedas, the holy texts, are divided into four. People are discontent and begin to war. People begin to age. Disease takes hold. Finally, there is the Kali Yuga, the final age, the Dark Age, which is described as follows. Rulers will become unreasonable. They will levy taxes unfairly. Rulers will no longer see it as their duty to promote spirituality or to protect their subjects. They will become a danger to the world. People will migrate from the deserted areas of the world to countries where wheat and barley are the staple food sources. Avarice and wrath will become common. Humans will openly display animosity to each other and will be ignorant in all things. People will have thoughts of murder with no justification. Lust will be viewed as acceptable, and sex will be seen as the central requirement of life. Manliness and womanliness will be judged according to one's expertise at sex. Sin will increase in all areas. Virtue will decrease in all areas. People will become addicted to intoxicating drink and drugs. Women will no longer marry. Spiritual leaders will be mocked and attacked, their teachings insulted and ignored. Laws and rules will only be applied to people based on their wealth and power. Once more we see similar patterns and themes. Historically, the world was good to people. They wanted for nothing and the earth gave freely everything people need. Then humans become greedy. They begin to fight and make conquest against each other. Cities have become hives of scum and villainy. Religion falls apart. Sexual immorality runs rampant, as does drink, drugs, and other hedonist vices. Should it then come as no surprise that we see these themes manifest within younger religions, such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that shares the same roots? The story of Adam and Eve, two people living their religion in all that they do under God, the earth giving its bounty willingly for all they could want. Then they turn their back on this veritable paradise for their own greed via temptation, and thus the Golden Age ends. So Adam must toil in the fields and die there, and Eve must have difficulty in childbirth. After many generations of humans forget God and turn more towards their vices of greed, hedonism, and other sins, God punishes humanity with a flood, saving only those whose faith is strong, the story of Noah. After the waters subside, they are given a new world under the rainbow covenant with God, that they may eat of the fruitful plants and of the animals, but that the animals will be afraid of them. All of these stories share many commonalities and warn us against the same things that destroyed previous civilizations. They were not all destroyed by flood either. Many simply crumbled from within or were taken over and destroyed by others. But the core message remains the same. Greed and excess materialism causes an overextension of humans into the environment. Turning away from religion, or morality more generally, leads to social degradation. The desire for only drink, drugs, and sex destroys the family unit and erodes the basis of society, leading to hatred of others and a constant desire to measure your own wheat by the bushels of another. It's tempting to dismiss these as mere stories and religious ramblings. However, stories have a purpose, and stories that last the ages usually do so because they are worth telling and serve a great purpose for those who would listen to them. Stories are, after all, how ideas are transmitted from generation to generation in ages long before writing. We are not so different from our ancestors. The only thing that separates you from them is technological advancement. The animal living in that environment is still very much the same. If one were to look around at modern Western society and compare it to these stories and prophecies, well, I'll let you be the judge of that.